Dear friends, this is the part 3 of the lecture that I have begun on Mathew effect in science. So, this is the concluding lecture, the third installment. In this lecture, I will discuss the Mathew effect in operation at the level of institutes, at the institutional level, at a macro level. Then I will move on to the concept of precocity and late bloomers in relation to Mathew effect. Then I will finally talk about the symbolism of intellectual property as discussed by Robert Merton. Now, we have already discussed how Mathew effect can be dysfunctional for individual scientists, particularly the newcomers and not so eminent ones. We have already discussed further that though it is dysfunctional for individual scientists, but it can be functional for the very nature of science itself, because it helps in the diffusion of scientific knowledge. When we pick up the writings of famous person, in the process by reading them, those ideas get communicated to the wider scientific community, and that is the ultimate goal of science, that is diffusion of spread of scientific knowledge. And so it is functional for science itself at a broader level. Then we discussed the social and psychological basis of Mathew effect. What makes a reputed person reputed? They have certain social character, exceptional ego strength, they have that training which they received in evocative, stimulating environment in their younger days, which they pass on to their immediate successors, juniors in the labs, the normative guidelines of how to go about research, their ability to pick important problems, all these things makes them unique, separate from the lot. Now, finally, we said that though the uniqueness of the scientist make them more visible, but at the same time, if we look at the fact that they don't become eminent overnight, they became eminent over a period of time, and they took time to establish themselves. Similarly, it is the case with the younger scientists. We must give them time to mature, because if you do not, then they'll get ignored, and many of the new things that they may come up with will miss out on them. Now, we come to another dimension of Mathew effect, that Mathew effect can also operate at institutional level. Now, there is a stratification system within the scientific community. The not so well known ones are at the bottom, well known ones, the reputed ones, at the top. So, this is a class structure. Those who are at the top get more facilities, those who are at the bottom get relatively less facilities. Similarly, Mathew effect can also be operational at the institutional level. The centers of demonstrated excellence, top universities, elite institutions are the equivalent of well-known scientists, and relatively unknown, obscure universities, research centers are the junior scientists who are at the bottom level in the class structure, but it is at the institutional level. The centers of demonstrated excellence, the top universities, for instance in America, you think of Harvard, you think of Columbia, you think of MIT, you think of Chicago. These institutes get more funding from the industry. These institutes attract the brightest faculty members from all over the world these institutes receive the finest of talents who enroll themselves in these institutes as students. Now that is about US, it can be UK, it can be Cambridge University, it can be Oxford University, or it can be in India, it can be in the engineering and technical education, it can be the IITs. For social science, it can be Delhi University, it can be Jawaharlal Nehru University, it can be Institute of Economic Growth, it can be Delhi School of Economics. For social science, these are the top elite institutes. They get the finest of faculty, the best of students. They find it easier to attract more funding. Hence, it further reinforces their excellence. It further reinforces their strength. They go from strength to strength. They become better. The contributions by those scientists, academicians working in these institutes are far superior to those who are working in mediocre institutes. For instance, in India, we have Bundelkhand University, we have Merton University, we have Kuvempu University. There are so many universities who are not in the top bracket, but they may also have bright faculty members. They may have bright students who have potential, but that potential doesn't get tapped because all the attention is focused on those top elite universities or institutes. They walk away with all the credit, they walk away with all the advantages. So this is the operation of working of Mathew effect at an institutional level. It is a classic case of Marxian idea of rich getting richer, poor becoming poorer. Like one example that is given by Robert Merton from US is that he says 6 elite institutes of US, Harvard, Berkeley, California Institute of Technology, Columbia, and Chicago and Princeton, all these 6 institutes produced in mid-1960s, 22% of PhDs in physical and biosciences, of which they just produced 22% of PhDs. But of this 22%, 69% went on to get Nobel Prize. So this shows the extra advantages that these top universities get, which results in top prizes going to people who belong to these institutes, to going to scientists, to faculty members who are working in these top institutes. So they always attract bright and exceptional faculty members, which over a period of time results in lopsided education delivery. If you have the best in one place and mediocre in another place, definitely the education delivery, the quality of education delivery would be much superior in those institutes, because there is a concentration of scientific resources and talent in those elite institutes, and people take advantage of that. The faculty members, the scientists, the students who work there, they take very good advantage of that, and they are able to realize their potential and they make it big. So it in a way reinforces the reflection of Mathew effect in the macro structure. Now this is the first part of my discussion in this concluding lecture, where I discussed the Mathew effect in operation at the macro level, at the institution level of institutes. Now I come to second aspect, that is the cumulative advantage and disadvantage of scientific resources at disposal to scientists. Now this part of Mathew effect is taken from the second article that he wrote in 1988. The first article he wrote in 1968 on Mathew effect. That is where he introduced this topic. Second article on Mathew effect he wrote exactly 20 years afterwards in 1988, and he further reviews what has happened in those 20 years. The original thesis that he proposed, does it still stand true, or is there a change, is there some addition? He finds that it still holds true, and there is further evidence given by other scientists of Mathew effect in operation in the scientific community. And all the scientists, all the scholars who have worked in the field of sociology of science, they have come to the conclusion that there is a widening gap in the initial comparative advantages of trained capacity, the structural location, and the availability of resources between those who are located in good places, those who have initial ability, those who showed signs of talent in the early part of their career. They get more advantages, they get cumulative advantage, additional advantage, and that widens the gap between those who have already made a mark and those who are yet to make a mark. In this regard, the couple of examples he quotes, he says that the two scientists, one of them was population geneticists, another was biogeneticist. These two scientists collaborated on a joint project which culminated in publication of their result, and this result was published in the same journal, in the same issue, back to back. In both of them were their joint authors, in both the papers in the same issue of the journal, they are the co-authors. In the first paper, the senior scientist, well-known scientist Leontin, was the main author, and the second paper, J.L. Hobby, the junior scientist, was the main author. But if one looked at those papers, one could tell that in terms of conceptualization, in terms of execution, in terms of writing, in terms of contribution to method, both had made similar contributions. Their contributions were not divisible. So the point is, both the papers were written by two scientists where both of them made similar contribution. But in the first paper, the senior scientist is the main author, first author. In the second, the junior scientist is the main author. But when it came to citation, it was found that the one which had senior scientist as the first author got more citation than the second one, where the junior scientist is the main author. Every time the junior scientist article written by the junior scientist as the main author got cited, it always invariably included the other article where the senior scientist is the main author. But it was the reverse was not true. The article where the senior scientist is the main author was cited, but need not necessarily include the citation of the other one. It proves Mathew effect in operation. Another example that he gave is that he quoted J.V.S. Halden, famous biologist, bioscientist. Now J.V.S. Halden said that when he worked at ISI Calcutta, he worked with an exceptionally talented Indian scientist, S.K. Roy, and because of his tremendous research, J.V.S. Halden could produce and come up with a very significant finding regarding rice research on rice. But when it came to the time of publication, he could not keep him as the first author. because he knew that if he puts S.K. Roy as the first author, people will not give him any credit, because he was not at all a PhD, he was not a first class master's also. People would anyway give credit to J.V.S. Halden, though J.V.S. Halden himself acknowledged that the entire work was the brainchild of S.K. Roy. But in this scientific community, because of Mathew effect, operation and the working and the psychology of Mathew effect, the person who has done more work, because the person is unknown, would not get any credit. Now, Mathew effect is also related to the concept of precocity and late bloomers. There is, Robert Merton says, there is a institutional bias for precocity. So, we have these two words, precocity and late bloomers. Those who are precocious, those who are precociously talented, are those who are exceptionally talented from a very early age of their life. They show initial ability, early genius. They are exceptionally bright for their age. They are precocious people. Now, Robert Merton says, if you look at the society at a broader level, then we'll come to the scientific community. He says, in the society, precocious child, precocious students, they always walk away with all the scholarships, fellowships, residencies, in case of medical sciences, top prizes, because of their initial superlative ability, capabilities. They may or may not sustain their brilliance over a period of time. They may slow down over a period of time. Contrast them with the late bloomers. Late bloomers take time to mature. Nature gifts us with tremendous ability to pick up over a period of time. Different individuals have different ability, different potential. Some people pick up early, some people pick up late. So the late bloomers may pick up things late, may succeed late than the precocious people, but they may continue to shine throughout their life. They may make late contribution, but their contribution may continue for a longer period of time compared to the precocious people. Now, what happens in a society? In a wider society, those who are precocious talent, they get all the advantages. And let us look at the class structure. There is a person who belongs to upper class. There is a person who belongs to lower class, the lower strata of society. The person who is precocious will not have any problem getting scholarship, fellowship, getting admission in top universities, top institutions, in medicine, in law, in engineering. Compare them with the late bloomers from an upper class. The person may not show early sign of ability, but the person may get backed up by his or her family background, by parental support, by economic support from the family. The person who is a late bloomer but belongs to a upper class family can always make a strong comeback at a later point of his or her career. The parents may put him or her in a private engineering college, in a private law school, or in a private medical school. The person may pick up things and can do fabulously well afterwards. Contrast this person with a late bloomer from a lower class, from a not so privileged strata of society. The person may drop out early because the person is not showing early signs of ability. The person may struggle. If you struggle and if you happen to come from a lower class, from a poor family, then there are chances that you drop out altogether. You drop school, you drop college, you change your stream, you don't get a second chance. Even if you have the ability to make a comeback, to bloom later. Now, this is a basic concept which is found in wider society. Bring that idea into academics, to the scientific community. There are certain people who are late bloomers within the scientific community. There are certain departments where faculty members are late bloomers. For instance, Robert Merton says people from social sciences and humanities are invariably late bloomers. They always take time to mature, but once they mature, they keep making meaningful contribution in their field compared to the biological sciences or mathematics or physical sciences or chemistry. But those late bloomers always find it difficult to cope up with absence of resources available at their end. Absence of resources, we discussed about funding or lack of funding, we discussed about getting a chance to get published in international journals, reputed journals. We talked about your book getting published by a top publisher, you're getting a chance to buy scientific equipments for your laboratory. For instance, psychology lab in humanities and social sciences. So late bloomers always struggle, whether in the wider society or in the academics, because they find it difficult to get that second chance. Even if they have ability, they can pick up, they can always make a strong comeback, and they can sustain their effort over a longer period of time compared to the precocious people. Now, I come to another aspect. If Mathew effect is in operation at the individual level, at the institutional level, then how is that this is counteracted? How is that it is neutralized? Robert Merton says, you see, if we simply look at the growth of science, and if we extrapolate in the 20th century, if you look at the growth of science and if we extrapolate the figures from 1930s and 50s to 1980s, 90s and well into 21st century, simply based on statistical extrapolation, now every human being on earth would have become scientist. Even their cats and dogs would have become scientists by now, if you simply go by statistical extrapolation, looking at the growth of science in the early part of 20th century, but that has not happened. Similarly, if Mathew effect is in operation at the individual level as well as at the level of institutions, then all these big universities all over the world would have produced all the best academicians, all the best faculty members, all the best scientists. It doesn't happen. What are the countervailing processes? What are the processes that neutralize this thing? There are 3 or 4 Robert Merton has identified. First, in many cases, established scientists, they refuse to put their name into the joint collaborations, into the papers, books, articles. That is one way. Another way in which it is neutralized is that many young capable scientists, faculty members, do not join a department or an institute where there are plenty of famous ones. They know that if they go there, they will not be able to succeed. They will always be overshadowed. They will not get a chance to make a mark on their own. Conversely, already known reputed scientists would not like to have junior scientists who are extremely capable or more capable than themselves. They may not like them to be part of the same department, same institutes. The issue can be social or psychological, but whatever the issue may be, but it neutralizes. So the faculty members moves to other universities, other institutes. So there is a gradual spreading of talent across the institutes within a country. Then there is this, when an institute gets some funding, it's equally divided among all the departments. So certain departments who are lagging behind other departments, they also get a boost, financial boost. It also works at a macro level where government provide equal amount to different universities as funding. Industry provides equal amount to different universities for their growth, for their development. So because of such government initiative, the departments or the institutes which are mediocre, they also get a chance to come up. So these are the ways in which this process is counteracted. Now I come to the final part of this discussion, that is a symbolism of intellectual property. Now a part of it was discussed when we were discussing communism as one of the ethos of science, where Robert Merton says that science is social, it is collaborative, it is shared enterprise, where scientist takes or draws material from his or her predecessors, works on it and presents it to the future scientist to take from it. In this context, Robert Merton makes a very important statement, very significant statement, that in science one's private property is established by giving its substance away. Only when you give your substance away, only when you communicate your scientific findings, then your ownership of that finding, ownership of that article is truly established. It's a very interesting statement to make. This basically talks about the symbolism of intellectual property. It talks about the fact that the positive recognition by peers is a basic form of reward. All other rewards such as monetary or career advance or material scientific benefits are derived from it. In fact, through the communication system, by giving your substance away, that is communicating your work to the greater scientific community, to the wider scientific community, you establish your ownership of that. How does that happen? It happens through references and citations. References and citations or bibliography are not nuisance, are not just ornamental things in a book or an article. They are not footnotes. Doesn't serve a ornamental function, superficial function. It serves a very important function. It in fact serves two very important functions. The references, the bibliography that you find in books or in articles, in academic works, it serves two important functions. One is instrumental and the other one is symbolic. In instrumental function, he says, when you have reference or bibliography, the instrumental function says that it directs the reader to the original source. It leads to further source of knowledge. When you look at a reference or bibliography, we look at that this work has been cited. We get to know about the work that has been cited, the publisher, the author, the year of publication. Then we can always locate that book and we can read that. We can further validate our knowledge. We look at the reference in that book, and from there on we can go on finding more books, more knowledge claims, more authors, and we get to know more about them. So it serves an instrumental function where it directs the readers to the original source. From the original source we can go to further original source. It leads to further source of knowledge. Then we have a symbolic function, that is peer recognition. When I cite something, I give acknowledgement to that person. I acknowledge the authorship of that person. And that is a normative reciprocity. It is reciprocal. If I write something, I communicate, the person who cites it, puts it in his or her article or book, acknowledges my contribution by putting it in citation. Otherwise it constitutes plagiarism, intellectual, academic larceny. So through such acknowledgement of the person who has written the book, by putting it in our citation or bibliography, we basically we acknowledge and we recognize the person's contribution. The recognition is automatically given through citation and bibliography. That is a symbolic function that establishes the norm of reciprocity, give and take. So hence, when Merton says that in science one's private property is established by giving its substance away, this is what he means. Only when it is communicated and the communicated finding is cited, the person who cites it, quotes it, acknowledges the original author, and that is how, through that recognition, the norm of reciprocity in the scientific community is established. It maintains a scientific tradition. It leads to further scientific knowledge diffusion. This brings us to an end of discussion of Mathew effect in science. In the next class, I will take up a new topic, that is the structure of scientific revolution. I will move on to the history of science in the next lecture. Thank you.